Filmmaking, in of itself, that was the easy part.
What was the first day of filming American Homeboy like?
First day of filming was, so this was before we worked a deal with the hotel. We were at a different hotel and they didn't want us to film at the hotel, but I had already rented it. So the first day of filming was us sneaking in a bunch of film equipment for an hour and then completely transforming the hotel room into a studio that we could film in. And the room was a little bit too small, and there were a few things that we needed to iron out after those first interviews. But going forward, we smoothed it out pretty quick by working a deal with the hotel and things like that. So,
sorry, was this here in LA or this
yeah,
was in San Jose?
that was in LA. And you know, one thing that I tried to do with the interviews is I tried to be in a full-blown conversation with them by the moment they arrived. So we're in the lobby. By the time we're in the elevator and we're getting upstairs to the hotel, we've already been in a full-blown conversation. So they're just sitting down and we're continuing that conversation. And I found that that really helped loosen people up and make it a little bit easier. Part of the reason we did such long interviews, 3-4 hours, is because sometimes when you're talking with people, it takes a while for that shell to come down. Sometimes when you're talking with an academic, for example, they're really putting forward this sort of academic, professional answers on everything. But what I want is the real them. I want to bring down that. And so they'll feel more comfortable as time goes on. So we were really cognizant about being conversational. I didn't have any pre-written questions. We just sat down and talked. And sometimes I would let them just steer the conversation because that would let me know what they were interested in, where their head was at, you know, and so kind of steer that energy toward the film, and then I would figure it out later as far as editing went. And I thought that was a lot easier.
Right, yeah, so many people have like this specific media pitch.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. They want to make sure they're, you know, coherent in what they're saying, but when you can get to that third hour or whatever, you can get some real gold, you know.
Yeah. Well, sure, like with Charlie in our film, he's a Vietnam veteran and he's also an academic and an author. You know, when I sat down with him, I think we interviewed him for 4 hours, and the first 3 hours was him being very academic and everything. But by the time we got to that last hour, when he really started talking about Vietnam and losing his eye and getting flown out of the war zone after, you know, being hit by shrapnel, and hearing his real perspective on turning against the Vietnam War when he went back and became a protester, that was what I was looking for. That type of, that narrative coming from his heart and those raw feelings. And that really helped make the movie and give audience insight into what Vietnam veterans were going through. And I don't think I would have gotten that had I not gotten through those first 3 hours of getting past that shell. And so, yeah, I think it's important to get people to loosen up, and everybody's a little bit different, especially with the types of people I was interviewing. So, you know, we had people in prison, we had people in gangs, we had people in Vietnam. And so everybody was a little bit different, but it took time to get most people to loosen up a little bit.
What were the negotiations you were making with these hotels? How would you approach them?
So it started with an email, and I basically emailed the hotel and I said, we are making independent film and we're looking at using the same hotel chain in every city that we film in. And we were wondering if there's some way that we can work out a discount and have the same suite in all of the hotels while we film, who would we speak with, and then they would forward me to whoever it was that I needed to speak with. And you know, it was a process. You had to go through corporate essentially to get it approved. We had to give them documentation for the company, what type of film we were making, all those different types of things. But after that was all sorted out, it made things a lot easier. You know, it was wonderful because we knew every time what type of room we were going to have. They knew that we were going to be bringing in a bunch of film equipment. And I think that our experience in working with the hotel was, I think what they cared about most was us not being disruptive. They didn't want it to be a disruptive thing in the lobby or in the hotel and things like that. And I think once we showed that, you know, we would just kind of quietly set up, leave at the end of the day, you know, they were really good to work with and easy to work with. Yeah. But you do have to go through the bureaucratic process first. And sometimes it could take a few months. Yeah.
And so there were people that just flat out said no once you told them?
Yeah, I think we talked to another hotel first and they didn't want anything to do with it. You know, there's a lot of permits and things like that you have to get in LA. We never once paid for a permit anywhere in LA. And we have another series we're filming right now, and we never paid for a permit either. So I don't know if I recommend that to everybody, but I'll just say when you're broke or you don't have a lot of money to spend on a film, sometimes you got to find ways to do it anyways. And so, you know.
But it sounds like it helped at least breaking that sort of barrier a little bit so that you weren't sneaking equipment up in the elevator.
Yeah, I didn't want to, you know, if you're paying camera people to help you, cinematographers to help you film, I didn't want to take the risk of having all this equipment out, you know, all these cinematographers, people who are driving here to do a 4-hour interview and then have it all just shut down out of nowhere. And so I think the easiest way to get past that potential resistance was to just be upfront with the hotel and just talk to them about what you're doing, be upfront, and find a way to work it out. And so that's what we did, yeah.
Did you hire a film crew to work on American Homeboy?
So I contracted a cinematographer. We did it a couple different ways, a couple different times, but for the most part, we worked with one camera person who also had the sound equipment. And so I worked with him to do the sound and the cinematography while we were doing the interviews. And so in our case, we worked with a cinematographer who works at Netflix or contracts with Netflix and worked on Unsolved Mysteries. He owns a $50,000 Red camera. We wanted to use a Red for stylistic reasons. Reds look a little bit different. They're kind of a pain to work with in post, that just like for a number of reasons, but it was worth it for us for the look we were going for. And he also had like a $10,000 microphone that we were able to use. And so we were able to get quality sound, quality cinematography between just me and him, basically. And I think the important part for us was to have backup sound also. And you know, I think that's really important. The thing with film is people will forgive poor visuals, but they'll never forgive poor sound. So sound is the most important part of any film, and especially with a documentary film, because you're always going to have kind of spotty footage with documentary films, especially if you're working with archival footage or moving around, but you need to have good film, and so, good sound. So we took a lot of pains to make sure that we had backup audio and really good audio up front. And so he worked for us. And there was a few times when we had to bring in one other person for the sound to help out. But yeah, it just fluctuated depending on how many interviews we're doing.
So when you say backup audio, are you talking about like a shotgun mic or a boom op?
Yeah, so we did a boom, and then we had lavs for backup. But there were some times when we did two booms, for example, and you know, wired those into somewhere else. So fortunately, we never had any sound problems. But that was my biggest fear through all those things, because bad sound will kill a project. Yeah.
And you checked the room sort of for room tone? Did you see if it was too echoey?
Yeah, so we dealt with that. We filmed at the same hotel once in San Jose as we did in LA, but the sound dynamics were completely different, even though it was the same room. And the air conditioner was in a slightly different spot, and there was people mowing outside, and so we had a lot of sound issues. But we worked with some professional sound editors in post who cleaned up that sound for us, and then it fit in with the rest of the film. So we were very fortunate to work with one of the sound guys who worked on Frozen 2 for Disney, and I didn't even know he was with Frozen when we did it, so it worked for us to be able to land a quality sound engineer. That was another example of me just approaching somebody trying to work out a deal, and he was interested in the project, and it turned out he was a pretty good sound guy. So
where did you find him?
I found him online. Yeah, just digging around. He was located in the Midwest, and I pitched him this sort of project. So I didn't have a lot of money, but I thought this would be a project that he might want to associate with because it would go great on his resume and all this. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he's already worked with Disney and some other big companies, but he cut me a rate that was affordable for us working on this indie project. It had turned out that he had grown up in a neighborhood in California that had a bunch of lowriders. And so when I had mentioned lowriders, he's like, oh, well, I was from Mission District in San Francisco originally before I moved and set up this studio in the Midwest. And so he was instantly on board, and we were able to get good sound for an affordable price.
So you did the sort of talking head style interviews with the Red camera.
We did.
And then you had mostly Juan's archival footage?
Yeah, so we used some of Juan's archival footage for some of the 70s and 80s stuff, and then we worked with National Archives to procure a bunch of footage from Ford. And so we actually worked with the lawyers at Ford to get the rights to some of this footage, and then we worked with National Archives and got the deed to some of the footage that we used. So a little backstory for you. Ford, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were all over the world. And they had plants everywhere, and they would film stuff all over the world. And they would film newsworthy events and put together these reels for their employees to keep them up to date with recent events and things like that. Well, a lot of those were donated to the National Archives by Ford. And so you can talk to the National Archives and you can get a lot of this footage. And so for us, we had a part of the film where we were talking about the Mexican Revolution. Well, we found actual footage shot of the Mexican Revolution by Ford. Actual footage of the Mexican Revolution in Mexico. And so we got the deed to be able to use that footage in our film through Ford and through the National Archives. Pretty amazing.
It sounds like deed, it's like almost like a form of property. Mm-hmm. You're getting the rights to. For how long does this deed, last, and what's involved?
Well, I don't know a lot about deeds, but I think essentially what it was in terms of legal speak was basically it was a paper from the National Archives that said Ford had given us the rights to this and you can use this, and here's the legal paperwork that says you can use this also. And so we talked with Ford through lawyers, and then we talked with National Archives through lawyers. There's a lot of big, long process you have to go through if you're making a documentary film. Rights will be something that you spend a lot of time on. And we can get into that. I don't know if you mean we want to get into that at a later point or right now, but you want me to talk about it right now?
Yeah, I mean, are these rights in perpetuity, or so you forever, they don't expire, they're not festival rights?
No, this was rights in perpetuity in relation to our project. But one thing that I learned in making this project is we had to work with a bunch of lawyers in order to get a distribution deal. One of the things we had to do is we had to sit down and we had to log every scene in an Excel sheet for the whole film, the whole hour-and-a-half film. Every single second needed to be logged. So the lawyers will go through and they'll look at all of those scenes and they'll say, is there music in the background? Is there a logo in the background? Is it public or private property? Is there a release form for this person? And they'll weight it basically and say, what is their likelihood of being sued for any of these points on this scene? And they'll do that for every scene throughout the whole movie. Those lawyers will then write a letter, a clearance letter, and then that letter goes to the insurance company. And the clearance letter will say, this is your likelihood of being sued here, you're not likely to be sued here, et cetera, et cetera. Then the insurance company will say, we'll insure this part of the film, not the other, this part, not the other. In our case, we were able to get the whole film insured, every scene. But there are times when they won't insure the whole film. Your company will be liable for this one particular scene because insurance companies want to mitigate risk. So the best thing you can do is make sure you cover your bases to begin with while making a documentary film. Make sure you get all the proper releases, make sure you get the deeds to the archival footage and those types of things to avoid that. But then after the insurance company insures it, then you can take it to a distributor and get a distribution deal and go through that process.
For American Homeboy, what footage did you decide to leave in historically, and what parts did you decide to leave out, and why?
Yeah, that was difficult because we had so much great footage. There was a lot of footage that I wanted to leave in there. But at the end of the day, I needed to stick with what the story was. And there's a lot of great sound clips from interviews that we did as well that never made it into the film. And I think that part of being a movie director, putting together a movie, or whether you're painting or making a movie, sometimes you got to know when to stop. And sometimes you have to stick to what the vision is. And sometimes that means leaving things on the cutting room floor. And so I had an idea of what I wanted the film to look like. I had no idea how we were going to put it together until after all the interviews were done. And then I had 90 days to edit it. And so I edited it in 90 days. And once I stuck with, devised that division, how I was going to put together that vision, I just stuck with it, through those 90 days of editing. and didn't really turn back because we didn't have the luxury to turn back because we were already scheduled to be in a theater, and I couldn't outsource it to a professional editor because they wanted 9 months. We went through 2 terabytes of footage. So I had 20 terabytes of footage on archival footage, interviews, things like that. And so we pretty much just stuck with the vision, and that meant we had to leave a lot of stuff on the floor. But we did a little bit differently. We kept a lot of that extra footage now, and we posted online to promote the film and things like that. So, and we're also going to print transcripts of the full interviews and things like that. So it just because it doesn't end up in the film doesn't mean you still can't use it in other ways, especially in the age of social media.
Right, with shorts and things like that.
Yeah.
And you've done some in black and white, right? To
Correct, yeah.
denote that these are parts of the
Yeah,
film.
that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so you were the editor. So how many, 20 terabytes is how many hard drives?
Oh, it was a lot of hard drives. So I have a safe full of hard drives, probably 20 hard drives, something like that. One thing that I underestimated was preserving and duplicating all of the footage that you had. That's a very expensive process. But again, you're taking a big risk. Like if you're just keeping them all on one drive in one location, it's a huge risk. And so we had to duplicate everything, and then we kept them in different locations because what if there's a fire, things like that. Some good advice I got from another filmmaker was the rule of threes, which is 2 different locations and then 1 in a cloud. I don't like clouds, so I didn't use clouds, but I did have 2 different locations and I had them in fire safes just to make sure, in case anything happened. The other thing is sometimes drives can get corrupted going between Macs and PCs. And we actually had a drive that happened to. And thank goodness we had a backup drive. So it can be very expensive because drives, especially SSD drives, are not cheap. But that should be something that you probably plan for if you are filming a documentary film where you're working with a lot of archival footage.
And just out of curiosity, why don't you like the cloud? Is it just the cost, or?
Well, it takes a long time for one. Uploading 20 terabytes to a cloud could have taken 6 months. I have no idea. I mean, I tried to upload just the full movie to the cloud, and I never got through the process because it was taking so long. So, and I tried Dropbox, I tried Google Drive, I tried a lot of different things. I just am not crazy about clouds. I'm probably because I was born in 81 and I have not fully adjusted to some of the new technology, but if I can have physical media, that's what I prefer, yeah.
Well, you love going to thrift stores and buying DVDs?
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I still have DVDs. In fact, I'm a big fan of Christmas movies and Halloween movies because I like the seasonal movies. So I still buy all those in DVDs. I have them at my home, like a big collection.
What did this movie teach you about filmmaking?
The movie taught me that organization is really important in the process of filmmaking. Like, it's one thing to have an artistic vision, but to implement that vision is a whole different beast in and of itself. And talking to different people in business and Hollywood, I've learned that everybody has ideas. Ideas are not hard to come by, and often a lot of these execs have already heard the same ideas. What differentiates people who make a film is that they're able to implement that vision. They're able to stay organized and they're able to be consistent in getting that vision forward. And that's what separates professionals from people who never get their idea off the ground. And so, for us, you had to be incredibly organized in terms of all of our footage, labeling it, getting all the rights to that footage, and being very consistent, especially when you're dealing with investors and things like that. So I learned that the process of filmmaking is, it's kind of like writing. I mean, filmmaking in of itself, that was the easy part. That was the fun part. Editing it, that was the fun part. But 90% of it, the other part of that iceberg, was all organization, dealing with lawyers, dealing with rights, all of those different types of things. And it's the same thing with writing. I mean, I'm doing so much other things before I actually get to sit down and write for my job that writing becomes the easy part. If I can sit down and write, then that's the easy part. But there's so many other things that have to happen before you get to that point when you're running a media company. And so that's what I discovered in working with different people in Hollywood and meeting different people. And I was very fortunate to be able to get to talk with an A-list director who helped me out in terms of advice with the film. I won't say his name, but he's an A-list director. And seeing him and how he worked and his level of organization that was required really helped me understand what it takes to make a film.
I get the sense, though, you've always been fairly organized. You seem
Well,
that
I
way to me.
don't know if I'm fairly organized. I think I'm OCD is what it is. I think that I just become hyper obsessed with things. And so the organization is a byproduct of being obsessed, because it helps give me clarity, and it helps me, I've learned over time that the more organized you are and the more consistent you are, the better your chances of getting things done. And so I try to be very consistent, and I get up every day and I work and do the same thing, and I try to be organized in what I'm doing to make things easier on myself in the long run. It's not because it's fun. I don't think it's really fun for anybody, but that's part of the process.
How would Ken Burns have made this film?
It's funny that you bring up Ken Burns, because when I set out to make this film, I said to myself, how would Ken Burns make this film? So our film was about lowriding and zoot suit and cholo culture. These subcultures typically have been relegated to rap music videos, the woman airbrushed on the hood of the car, just snippets on YouTube that don't give them a lot of depth. What made this film different was when I sat down to make it, I said, how can I explore these subcultures in a serious, in-depth way? Not just snippets on YouTube with rap music in the background, not with adding to or creating more stereotypes. I wanted to pull that curtain down. Ken Burns has his faults with some films, right? For example, he left out the Zoot Suit riots when he made his World War II film, things like that. But he does get under the hood on a lot of his projects. And I said to myself, this is going to be my pitch to investors and to distributors. This film is how Ken Burns would have made this type of film. It's a serious look at these subcultures, at this outlaw culture, in a way that isn't typically done. And so that's what we set out to do.
And what types of stereotypes or tropes did you want to expose and sort of turn on its head?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was giving these guys an opportunity to simply talk. Because I think in and of itself, just hearing a lot of these guys and share their insight tears down a lot of preconceived notions. Because I think there's this preconceived notion that, oh, well, if you have somebody that was in a gang or was in prison, they must just be an idiot. But the truth is, when you hear these guys talk on camera and they're sharing their perspectives and they're explaining why they get the tattoos that they do, why they love lowriding, the history of those things, you see that some of these guys are very intelligent people. And I think that was important to kind of like break down that preconceived notion of that these people are just a bunch of idiot outlaws, which is not the case at all.
And you go into some of maybe the laws, things that happened in the late 80s that might have made it more fearful in the eyes of other cultures.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, we go into World War II, for example, where there was a point in LA where they were rounding up Mexican Americans just for wearing zoot suits. The zoot suit was banned in LA, and a lot of people don't know that history. A lot of people don't realize that lowriding in a large extent was a response to the over-policing at the time. Police would pull young youth over for lowriding, and so they took hydraulic pumps, put them into the cars so they can raise them up and not get pulled over by police. So it was a response to policing, but over time, that the evolution of those hydraulics started becoming what you see today, where they're bouncing up and down for competition and things like that. But it didn't begin that way. There was social reasons why all of these things began, and so I think that's really fascinating. We wanted to get under the hood with some of those topics.
Why name the movie American Homeboy?
It's funny that you say that. We went back over the transcripts, and the two words that come up the most in that entire movie is American and Homeboy. And that wasn't even planned. I named it American Homeboy because I wanted people to understand that this subculture that people typically think of as being this outsider subculture is actually very American. And these are Mexican Americans that we're talking about. They're Americans of Mexican descent, but they're Americans. And so I thought it was important for me to have people understand that from the outset. And I also thought it was a good name in general. You know, I think when you're talking about film or projects, you obviously want to find something that conveys the film, but also find something that's catchy, they can work on social media. You know, for me, having worked in marketing, the first things that were going through my head is, can I get, how does this play on social media? How does this play on, you know, with social media handles? How does this play with getting the rights to this name? Because you have to go through clearance with the title in order to use it through the distributor and things like that. So a lot of things have to go into coming up with the title, but ideally you come up with a title that is provocative, that draws interest to the film, conveys the film, and also can get through all the legal loopholes that you have to go through in order to use the title.
The word Chicano was considered offensive or made people uncomfortable?
Sure.
Why is that?
Yeah, there was a major distributor who we had spoken with who expressed interest in the film, but asked us if we could make the film and not use the word Chicano. Now the word Chicano, I mean, the whole film's around Chicano subculture. So for us, that was a no-go. I had to tell them, no, we can't do that. We can't take the identity away from the film. The whole film's about that identity. And so there are people who dislike the word because it's highly politicized, or they view it as highly politicized. And I think by virtue of focusing on Mexican Americans or that subculture of Mexican Americans, that they feel it's exclusive. And I don't think that that's the standpoint from most people in the subculture. I think most people in the subculture, it's just a way to describe their subculture, Chicano subculture. And so I think that some people that overread it are just choosing to overread it, but I don't necessarily think that it was. I think it stems from misunderstanding. Those are the people who should see the film. The distributor who wanted us to remove that word should see the film.